The crystalline spires of New Aurora Station caught the light of 3 distant suns, casting rainbow shadows across Lyra Navarre's wheeled hover chair. She guided it skillfully through the bustling commerce district, where beings from a dozen worlds haggled over exotic wares. Her iridescent skin, typical of Centaurians, no longer drew the admiring gazes it once had during her performances. Instead, she noticed the usual mix of pity and discomfort in the eyes that quickly darted away from her chair. 10 years had passed since the accident. 10 years since the anti-gravity generator had failed during her signature performance piece, Flight of the Solar Winds. The crash had shattered not only her lower spine, but also her dreams of becoming the first Centaurian to headline at the Galactic Arts Center on Earth. Lyra paused at a viewport, watching the steady stream of ships arriving at the station. A massive Earth vessel was docking, its hull bearing the insignia of the Terran Engineering Corps. She allowed herself a moment to remember when she'd once planned to perform for the crowds on humanity's homeworld. "Excuse me," a voice called from behind, the universal translator giving it a slight mechanical lilt. "But is this section of the station restricted to authorized personnel?" Lyra turned her chair, ready to deliver her usual polite but firm response to unwanted attention. Instead, she found herself facing the human male with keen gray eyes and a practical utility vest covered in tools. His most striking feature was the subtle shimmer of advanced prosthetics where his right leg should have been. Engineer Finn Harrison. He introduced himself with a slight bow, a gesture that acknowledged her Centaurian customs rather than the usual human handshake. "And judging by your expression, you're wondering why I'm asking about restricted areas when I'm clearly standing in a public space." "The thought had crossed my mind," Lyra replied, her translator converting her harmonic speech into standard English. Finn's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Because according to these scans," he held up a compact device, "there's enough restricted-grade neural interface technology in your hover chair to outfit a small medical bay. Either you're running a very sophisticated smuggling operation, or I'm one of Dr. Ven's failed experiments," Lyra finished, her tone sharp. The notorious human doctor had attempted to adapt Earth's neural interface technology for alien physiologies, with mixed results. "Actually," Finn said, his expression turning serious, "I was going to say, or you're exactly who I've been looking for. The TEC has made some significant breakthroughs in xenoneural integration. We're here to offer upgrades to anyone who received early-generation implants." Lyra's secondary heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "The last time I trusted human medical technology, I lost the ability to dance among the stars. Why should this time be different?" Finn's response surprised her. Instead of launching into a technical explanation or offering reassurances, he simply activated a holographic projector on his wrist. The image showed him in a military uniform, standing proud. Then it shifted to him in a medical bed, his right leg missing. Finally, it showed him running, jumping, even performing acrobatic moves with his prosthetic limb. "Because this time," he said softly, "you're not dealing with a corporation trying to adapt human tech to alien biology. You're talking to someone who spent the last 8 years specifically developing interfaces for non-human nervous systems." He paused, then added, "and someone who knows exactly what it means to lose a part of yourself." Lyra studied him, her tertiary eyes picking up the subtle electromagnetic signatures that humans couldn't see. His prosthetics were far more sophisticated than anything she'd encountered before, and his biorhythms suggested complete sincerity. "Why me?" she asked finally. "There must be dozens of cases like mine on this station alone." "Because I saw your last performance," Finn admitted. "I was stationed here during my early research phase. What you could do in 0G. It wasn't just dancing. It was poetry in motion. And I believe that kind of artistry doesn't just vanish because of an accident. It evolves." For the first time in years, Lyra felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Hope. But hope had proven costly before. "What exactly are you proposing?" Finn knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. a gesture of respect in Centaurian culture, a partnership, your understanding of your own physiology and movement, combined with my technical expertise. It won't be easy, and I can't guarantee success. But I can promise you this. Whatever we develop together will be specifically designed for you, not some generic adaptation of human technology. Lyra gazed out at the stars beyond the viewport, her mind racing with possibilities she'd forced herself not to consider for a decade. When would we begin? Finn smiled, standing. I have a fully equipped lab 2 levels up. But first, I think we should talk about your dance. I need to understand exactly how you move before we can work on helping you move again. The laboratory hummed with energy as holographic displays filled the air around Lyra's diagnostic chair. She watched as complex neural patterns danced across the screens, her own nervous system laid bare in streams of data. Finn moved between the displays, his prosthetic leg making soft whirring sounds against the metal floor. Your nervous system is fascinating, he said, manipulating a 3-dimensional image of her spinal structure. The redundant neural pathways, the way your secondary and tertiary systems interconnect. It's like looking at a symphony written in biology. Is that a problem? Lyra asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. She'd spent the last week submitting to countless scans and tests, each one rekindling both hope and fear in equal measure. Finn shook his head, his expression thoughtful. Not a problem. An opportunity. See here. He highlighted a cluster of neural pathways. Human spines are relatively simple in comparison. One main highway for signals to travel. But yours, you have multiple routes. It's probably what helped you achieve such incredible control during your zero-G performances. And now those same pathways are just so much dead tissue, Lyra said bitterly. Not dead. Dormant. Finn's voice carried a quiet conviction that made her tertiary eyes focus on him. The damage severed the main connections, but these secondary pathways, they're still intact, just waiting for the right signal. He moved to a workbench where various components lay scattered in precise arrangements. Picking up what looked like a segment of silvery thread, he held it up to the light. This is a quantum neural bridge, my own design. Instead of trying to repair the damaged pathways directly, it creates new ones using quantum entanglement. Lyra leaned forward, intrigued despite her cautious nature. I thought quantum effects couldn't be maintained in biological systems. They couldn't, until about 3 years ago. Finn's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. The breakthrough came from studying Arcturian deep-sea creatures. They naturally maintain quantum states in their nervous systems. We adapted their biochemistry to create these bridges. He set the component down and turned to face her fully. But before we go any further, you need to understand something. This isn't just about installing new technology. Your body will need to learn how to use these pathways. It's going to be challenging, sometimes painful, and success isn't guaranteed. Nothing in life is guaranteed, Lyra responded, her translator adding harmonics that conveyed determination, except perhaps entropy. Finn laughed, the sound warming the sterile lab. Now you're thinking like an engineer. His expression grew serious again. We'll start with a single bridge, connecting just one neural cluster. It will take about 6 hours to install, and you'll need to stay in the lab for at least 48 hours for monitoring. Lyra's hands gripped the arms of her chair. When? I can have everything ready by tomorrow morning. But first, he pulled up another hologram, this one showing her last performance. The image of her younger self twirled through zero-G, creating patterns that seemed to defy physics. Talk me through this sequence. I need to understand exactly how it felt, how you controlled each movement. For the next several hours, they dissected her performance piece by piece. Finn asked questions no one had ever thought to ask before, not about the aesthetics or artistic meaning, but about the minute muscular controls, the neural feedback, the precise way she had interpreted spatial awareness in zero-G. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Finn finally stepped back from the displays. I think we're ready. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding those neural pathways. Lyra moved her chair toward the lab's exit, but paused at the door. Finn, why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just research. He was quiet for a moment, absently rubbing his prosthetic leg. When I lost my leg, I also lost my sense of purpose. I was a soldier who couldn't soldier anymore. But then someone showed me that what I'd lost didn't define what I could become. He met her gaze steadily. Sometimes we need someone else to help us see new possibilities. And what possibilities do you see for me? Looking up at this human who spoke of possibility rather than limitation, Lyra made her decision. Then we should find somewhere quiet. It's a long story. I've got time, Finn replied, falling into step beside her chair as they moved away from the viewport. And from what I've heard about Centaurian dance, it's a story worth hearing. The laboratory hummed with energy as holographic displays filled the air around Lyra's diagnostic chair. She watched as complex neural patterns danced across the screens, her own nervous system laid bare in streams of data. Finn moved between the displays, his prosthetic leg making soft whirring sounds against the metal floor. Your nervous system is fascinating, he said, manipulating a three-dimensional image of her spinal structure. The redundant neural pathways, the way your secondary and tertiary systems interconnect. It's like looking at a symphony written in biology. Is that a problem? Lyra asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. She'd spent the last week submitting to countless scans and tests, each one rekindling both hope and fear in equal measure. Finn shook his head, his expression thoughtful. Not a problem. An opportunity. See here. He highlighted a cluster of neural pathways. Human spines are relatively simple in comparison. One main highway for signals to travel. But yours, you have multiple routes. It's probably what helped you achieve such incredible control during your zero-G performances. And now those same pathways are just so much dead tissue, Lyra said bitterly. Not dead. Dormant. Finn's voice carried a quiet conviction that made her tertiary eyes focus on him. The damage severed the main connections, but these secondary pathways, they're still intact, just waiting for the right signal. He moved to a workbench where various components lay scattered in precise arrangements. Picking up what looked like a segment of silvery thread, he held it up to the light. This is a quantum neural bridge, my own design. Instead of trying to repair the damaged pathways directly, it creates new ones using quantum entanglement. Lyra leaned forward, intrigued despite her cautious nature. I thought quantum effects couldn't be maintained in biological systems. They couldn't, until about 3 years ago. Finn's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. The breakthrough came from studying Arcturian deep-sea creatures. They naturally maintain quantum states in their nervous systems. We adapted their biochemistry to create these bridges. He set the component down and turned to face her fully. But before we go any further, you need to understand something. This isn't just about installing new technology. Your body will need to learn how to use these pathways. It's going to be challenging, sometimes painful, and success isn't guaranteed. Nothing in life is guaranteed, Lyra responded, her translator adding harmonics that conveyed determination, except perhaps entropy. Finn laughed, the sound warming the sterile lab. Now you're thinking like an engineer. His expression grew serious again. We'll start with a single bridge, connecting just one neural cluster. It will take about 6 hours to install, and you'll need to stay in the lab for at least 48 hours for monitoring. Lyra's hands gripped the arms of her chair. When? I can have everything ready by tomorrow morning. But first, he pulled up another hologram, this one showing her last performance. The image of her younger self twirled through zero-G, creating patterns that seemed to defy physics. Talk me through this sequence. I need to understand exactly how it felt, how you controlled each movement. For the next several hours, they dissected her performance piece by piece. Finn asked questions no one had ever thought to ask before, not about the aesthetics or artistic meaning, but about the minute muscular controls, the neural feedback, the precise way she had interpreted spatial awareness in zero-G. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Finn finally stepped back from the displays. "I think we're ready. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start rebuilding those neural pathways." Lyra moved her chair toward the lab's exit, but paused at the door. "Finn, why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just research." He was quiet for a moment, absently rubbing his prosthetic leg. "When I lost my leg, I also lost my sense of purpose. I was a soldier who couldn't soldier anymore. But then someone showed me that what I'd lost didn't define what I could become." He met her gaze steadily. "Sometimes we need someone else to help us see new possibilities. And what possibilities do you see for me?" "That's not for me to say," he replied with a slight smile. "I'm just providing tools. You'll be the one to decide what to build with them." The next morning, Lyra arrived at the lab to find it transformed. Additional equipment had been installed, and a team of medical technicians was running final checks on systems she didn't recognize. Finn stood at the center of it all, his usual utility vest replaced by sterile medical gear. "Having second thoughts?" he asked as she approached. Lyra looked at the medical bed waiting for her, remembering the last time she trusted her future to human medical technology. But then she looked at Finn, at the quiet confidence in his stance, at the prosthetic leg that moved as naturally as flesh and bone. "No," she said firmly. "No more second thoughts. Just new possibilities." Finn nodded, understanding everything she wasn't saying. "Then let's begin." Pain bloomed along Lyra's neural pathways like solar flares, her iridescent skin pulsing with distress patterns. The quantum bridge installation had gone smoothly, but no one, not even Finn, had predicted how her Centaurian physiology would react to the initial activation. "Neural feedback is spiking," one of the medical technicians reported, their voice tight with concern. "We should terminate the connection." "No." Lyra's harmonics cracked through the translator, her tertiary eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Keep going." Finn moved into her field of view, his face etched with worry. "This isn't like the simulations. Your secondary nervous system is treating the quantum bridge as an invasion. We need to shut it down before." "Before what?" Lyra demanded. "Before it damages the precious technology, or before I lose my nerve." "Before you get hurt," Finn replied softly. "This isn't about the technology. It's about you." A particularly sharp surge of pain made Lyra's back arch. Through gritted teeth, she managed, Tell me about the first time, when you tested your leg." Understanding flickered across Finn's face. He pulled up a stool beside her bed, maintaining eye contact while his hands flew over the neural monitoring controls. "It was hell," he said conversationally, as if they were sharing a meal rather than fighting her body's rejection of foreign technology. The neural interfaces weren't nearly as sophisticated then. Imagine having every nerve ending screaming at once, telling your brain that something impossible was happening. "Sounds familiar," Lyra gasped, managing a weak smile. "The difference is, I didn't have three separate nervous systems fighting each other." Finn's fingers danced across the holographic controls. "Your secondary system is trying to protect you, while your tertiary system is actually attempting to integrate with the bridge. They're creating a feedback loop." A new alert sounded, drawing concerned looks from the medical team. Finn studied the readings, then looked at Lyra with an intensity that cut through her pain. "I have an idea, but it's risky. We could try to synchronize the quantum bridge's frequency with your tertiary nervous system. It might help override the secondary system's resistance." "The chance of success?" Lyra asked, her skin rippling with pain patterns. "About 30%, but if it fails—" He hesitated. "What aren't you telling me?" Finn's jaw tightened. "If it fails, the feedback could permanently damage your remaining neural pathways. You could lose what mobility you still have." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the war being waged inside her body. 10 years ago, she had trusted technology without understanding the risks. Now, understanding them fully, she had to decide if the possibility of dancing again was worth risking everything. She opened her eyes, meeting Finn's worried gaze. "When you lost your leg, did you ever regret trying the experimental prosthetics, even when it hurt?" "Never," he answered without hesitation. Pain meant I was still fighting. "Then do it. Sync the frequencies." Finn nodded once, then turned to his team. "Prepare for quantum frequency modulation. Route all monitoring through my terminal. If something goes wrong, I want to be the one responsible." The next few minutes were a blur of technical adjustments and increasing pain as Finn carefully aligned the quantum bridge's frequency with her tertiary nervous system. Lyra felt as if her body was being torn apart and reassembled at the molecular level. Then, suddenly, something shifted. The pain didn't decrease, but it changed character, becoming more rhythmic, like music played through her nerves. "Finn," she whispered, "I can feel patterns." His hand stilled over the controls. "What kind of patterns?" Like the zero-G dance sequences, but inside my neural pathways." She concentrated, trying to describe the sensation. "It's as if my tertiary system is remembering the movements, trying to teach them to the quantum bridge." Finn's eyes widened. "Of course," he breathed. "Your species evolved in variable gravity environments. Your tertiary nervous system doesn't just control movement, it contains encoded patterns of movement." His fingers flew over the controls with renewed purpose. "Don't fight the patterns, Lyra. Try to move with them, like you would in a performance." Lyra closed her eyes, letting her consciousness sink into the neural rhythm. The pain was still there, but now it felt almost like the familiar burn of rehearsal, of pushing her body to learn new forms of movement. Slowly, incredibly, she felt her lower body begin to respond. Not with actual movement. The neural bridges were too new for that, but with potential, with possibility. Neural integration at 60% and climbing, one of the technicians reported, their voice colored with disbelief. "The quantum bridge is actually adapting to her movement patterns." Finn's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Keep going, Lyra. You're dancing with your own neurons now. Show them how it's done." A laugh bubbled up through the pain. "I never thought I'd have an audience for this particular performance." "Integration at 80%, the technician called out. "Stability it's actually improving. The secondary nervous system is falling into alignment with the tertiary patterns, because it's recognizing the movements," Finn said excitedly. "It's not seeing the bridge as an invasion anymore, but as part of a familiar dance sequence." The pain began to ebb as her neural networks synchronized with the quantum bridge. Lyra felt tears sliding down her face, not from pain this time, but from the sheer wonder of feeling her complete nervous system working in harmony for the first time in a decade. "Neural integration complete," the technician announced. "Bridge is stable. All systems are. Well, they're actually better than stable. They're flourishing." Finn's smile was brilliant. "How do you feel?" Lyra took a shaky breath, cataloging the new sensations coursing through her body. "Like on learning a new choreography," she said finally. "Difficult, challenging, but possible. That's what we'll name this procedure," Finn decided. "The Neural Symphony, because you didn't just accept the quantum bridge, you taught it to dance." The lab's privacy seal shattered under the authority override, admitting a stream of corporate security officers in Helix Biotech uniforms. Their leader, a sharp-featured woman named Director Roth, strode directly to where Finn stood protectively in front of Lyra's recovery pod. "Engineer Harrison," Roth's voice was precisely calibrated for maximum authority. "You are in violation of multiple patents and proprietary research agreements. Cease all procedures immediately." Finn's stance didn't waver. "Your patents don't cover xenoneural applications, Director. I checked very carefully before beginning this project. Our new acquisitions suggest otherwise." Roth activated a holographic display showing complex legal documents. "As of 6 hours ago, Helix Biotech owns exclusive rights to all quantum neural bridge technology in the Centauri sector. Lyra, watching through the pod's transparent cover, saw Finn's prosthetic leg twitch. A tell she learned meant he was angry. You can't patent something that's already in development, he argued. Our project predates your acquisition. A project without proper permits or oversight, Roth countered. Using restricted technology on an alien subject without corporate approval. The legal implications alone. I am not a subject. Lyra's voice cut through the tension, her translator adding harmonics of authority she hadn't used since her performing days. I am a sentient being who gave informed consent to an experimental procedure. Roth's eyes flicked to the recovery pod, taking in Lyra's iridescent skin and the complex medical readings displayed above her. Ms. Navari, we sympathize with your condition. Helix Biotech would be happy to offer you our standard medical package. The same package you offered the other victims of neural damage. Finn interrupted. The one that leaves them dependent on your maintenance contracts and proprietary upgrades. Our business model is not on trial here, Mr. Harrison. Roth signaled her security team. Prepare to disconnect the patient and transfer all research data to corporate servers. Stop. Finn's voice carried the crack of military command. The neural bridges are still stabilizing. Disconnecting them now could cause permanent damage to her entire nervous system. Then you should have thought of that before conducting illegal experiments. Roth moved toward the control panel, but Finn stepped in her path. Director, he said quietly, are you familiar with Centaurian physiology? Specifically, their tertiary nervous system's ability to generate electromagnetic pulses when threatened. Roth paused, her hand hovering over the controls. Is that a threat? No. Lyra spoke up, her skin beginning to shimmer with increasing intensity. It's a warning. My species evolved to protect our neural networks from outside interference. Any attempt to forcibly disconnect these bridges will trigger an automatic defense response. One that would, Finn added with careful precision, likely destroy not only your equipment, but also any data you're hoping to salvage, along with creating a diplomatic incident. Assaulting a Centaurian citizen could violate at least 3 interstellar treaties. The security officers shifted uncomfortably as Lyra's bioluminescence grew brighter. Roth's expression hardened. You're bluffing. Our research shows no evidence of such defensive capabilities. Your research, Finn replied, never involved a professional zero-G dancer with enhanced neural control. Would you like to test your theories against her training? A tense silence filled the lab. Lyra maintained the electromagnetic buildup, though it strained her recovering systems. She watched Roth calculate possibilities, risks, and potential profits. There may be another solution, Roth said finally. Helix Biotech is always interested in innovative research. We could offer you a position, Mr. Harrison. Full funding, state-of-the-art facilities, in exchange for ownership of the technology. Finn shook his head. This isn't about profit. It's about giving people back their autonomy. Everyone claims noble intentions. Roth's voice dripped condescension. But innovation requires resources. How long can you continue without proper funding? What happens when Ms. Navari needs maintenance or upgrades? She won't. Finn's quiet confidence made everyone in the room turn to him. Because I'm not selling her a product. I'm teaching her how to maintain and modify her own neural bridges. The technology might be complex, but the principles can be learned. Lyra felt a surge of gratitude warm her chest. She had wondered about future dependence, but hadn't dared ask. Now she understood why Finn had insisted on explaining every detail of the procedure, every component's function. You're giving away proprietary technology, Roth said, aghast. No, Finn corrected. I'm giving people back control of their own bodies. Something your company seems to have forgotten is a basic right. This isn't over, Roth spat. Our legal team will be very interested in the documentation I've been collecting, Finn interrupted. About corporate exploitation of neural damage victims, about artificial scarcity of medical technologies, about prioritizing profit over recovery. He smiled, but there was steel in it. I may be just one engineer, Director, but I have friends in many star systems. People who believe healthcare shouldn't be held hostage by patents. Roth's face went through several interesting color changes before settling into a rigid mask. We'll be watching you, Harrison. She turned on her heel, gesturing for her security team to follow. As the lab's privacy seal re-engaged, Lyra let her electromagnetic field dissipate. That was close, she breathed. Too close. Finn agreed, already checking her neural readings. How are you feeling? That electromagnetic display must have taken a lot of energy. Worth it. Lyra managed a tired smile, though I didn't know my tertiary system could actually do that. Finn's hands tilled on the controls. It can't. At least, not anymore. But Roth didn't know that. Lyra stared at him for a moment, then began to laugh. The sound started deep in her chest and bubbled up through her translator in harmonics of pure joy. You bluffed a corporate director with made-up alien biology. I prefer to think of it as creative interpretation of xenophysiology. His serious expression cracked into a grin. Besides, your light show was very convincing. Have you considered going back into performance? First, Lyra said, her own smile widening. Teach me how these bridges work. I want to understand everything. She paused, then added softly, thank you for not treating me like a patient to be managed. Partners, remember. Finn checked a few more readings, then began pulling up technical diagrams. Now let's talk about quantum resonance patterns. I think you'll find they're not so different from choreographing a zero-G sequence. 6 months had transformed Finn's laboratory into something entirely new. Holographic displays showed dance sequences alongside neural mapping data. Tools for maintaining quantum bridges shared space with zero-G training equipment. And in the center of it all, Lyra stood. Her first steps had come 3 months ago, tentative, supported by guide rails, and Finn's steady presence. Now she moved with growing confidence, her iridescent skin shifting with patterns that reflected both effort and triumph. The quantum neural bridges had become an integral part of her nervous system, responding to her will with increasing precision. Neural synchronization is holding at 98%, Finn reported, watching the readings with practiced eye. How does it feel? Lyra executed a careful turn, her movements carrying echoes of her former grace, like remembering a dance I used to know. She paused, then added, but it's time for a new choreography. Finn looked up from his monitors. Are you sure? The zero-G chamber is ready, but there's no rush. We can take more time, Toe. I've had 10 years of taking time, Lyra interrupted gently. The neural bridges are stable. I understand how to maintain them, how to adjust their resonance patterns. Thanks to you, I'm not dependent on anyone's technology, but my own. She took a deep breath. I'm ready. The zero-G chamber had been installed last month, a final gift from Finn's military contacts before they were reassigned to other sectors. Its curved walls could generate a perfect null-gravity environment, identical to the performance spaces where Lyra had once danced. As they made final preparations, Finn's comm unit chimed with an incoming message. His expression flickered as he read it. Helix Biotech's appeal was rejected. The Interstellar Patent Office ruled that medical technologies developed for individual patients can't be exclusively owned by corporations. He smiled. We're free to share this with others. Others like me, trapped between worlds. Lyra's tertiary eyes tracked the complex patterns of the zero-G chamber's activation sequence. Anyone who needs it, Finn confirmed. I've already had inquiries from 3 different medical centers. They want to learn the neural symphony protocol. He finished the chamber's startup sequence and turned to face her fully. But right now, this is your moment. Are you ready? Lyra moved to the chamber's entrance, her movements smooth but still carrying hints of caution. Will you monitor from in here? I feel better knowing you're close by. Of course. Finn checked his own neural interfaces one last time. After 6 months of working together, they'd discovered his prosthetics could pick up trace resonances from her quantum bridges, allowing him to better track her neural patterns. Remember, start slow. Let your body remember. The chamber's gravity began to fade as they entered, bringing a familiar weightlessness that Lyra hadn't felt in a decade. Her breath caught as memories flooded back, of performances, of freedom, of flying through space, guided only by skill and artistry. Neural patterns are stable, Finn reported softly. You're doing great. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the quantum bridges hum through her nervous system. Slowly, she extended one arm, then a leg, testing her control in the zero-G environment. Each movement felt both familiar and new, like speaking a language she'd once known fluently, but had to relearn. I'm going to try something, she whispered. Before Finn could respond, she pushed off from the chamber's wall, spinning slowly in the weightless space. The neural bridges responded perfectly, allowing her to control her rotation with the same precision she'd once known. Tears floated from her eyes as she moved through the first sequence of her old performance piece, Flight of the Solar Winds. But this wasn't the same dance. It couldn't be. She was different now, changed by loss and recovery, and the strange partnership that had given her back her freedom. As if reading her thoughts, Finn spoke quietly from his observation position. You don't have to recreate what was. This is your chance to create something new. Lyra opened her eyes, watching her tears drift in the zero-G field like tiny stars. He was right. She wasn't the same dancer who had fallen a decade ago. That performance had been about pushing boundaries, about proving something. This was about reclaiming herself. She began to move again, but differently now. Her movements incorporated the precision of her old routine, but added something new. An acknowledgement of limitation transformed into strength, of broken things rebuilt into something stronger. The quantum bridges sang through her nervous system as she danced, no longer foreign technology, but an integral part of her art. Neural synchronization at 100%, Finn reported, his voice thick with emotion. Lyra, this is who I am now, she finished for him, executing a complex spiral that would have been impossible without the neural bridges. Not despite what happened, but because of it. Because someone taught me that broken things don't have to stay broken. She continued to dance, losing herself in the pure joy of movement. This wasn't a performance for an audience. It was a declaration of victory over impossibility, a celebration of science and art finding harmony in the space between stars. When she finally came to rest, floating in the center of the chamber, she found Finn watching her with undisguised awe. That was beautiful, he said simply. It was truth, she replied. Then, with a smile that carried all the light of her bioluminescent skin, she added, and it's only the beginning. As they exited the chamber together, Lyra's comm unit activated with an incoming message. She read it, then read it again, her tertiary eyes widening with each pass. What is it? Finn asked, noting her expression. The Galactic Arts Center on Earth, she said slowly. They want me to help develop a program for dancers with neural injuries, to teach them how to integrate medical technology into their art. She looked at Finn, her skin pulsing with patterns of disbelief and joy. They said my performance just now was revolutionary. Your performance? Finn raised an eyebrow. You mean the private session we just finished? Lyra's skin flushed with embarrassment. I may have broadcast it to a few key people in the dance community. I wanted to show them that recovery doesn't mean giving up who you are, that sometimes it means becoming something more. Finn laughed, the sound bouncing off the lab's walls. Lyra Navari, you are full of surprises. His expression softened. Will you take the position? Only if my engineer is willing to relocate to Earth, she replied. After all, the neural symphony needs both a dancer and a technician to be properly taught. Partners. Finn extended his hand, human and Centaurian customs blending in the gesture. Lyra took it, her iridescent skin shimmering with patterns of friendship and possibility. Partners, in this dance, and whatever comes next.